Okay, we're live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, a returning guest. His name is Don Jeffries. We spoke back in October 2021, about a subject I was really interested in. I was delighted we talked about it. Title of that talk is author Don Jeffries talks about maverick politician Huey the Kingfish Long. But today we're going to talk. I followed up with him about a book he's just published back in late 2021. Title of that book is On Borrowed Fame, Money, Mysteries, and Corruption in the Entertainment World. And it's a very, very thoroughly researched book and kind of a tough look at some of the lives of people in Hollywood. But I'm going to go through a list of his books. The other one, some of the other titles are The Unreals, 2015, Hidden History and Expose of Modern Crimes, Conspiracies, and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 2017, as well as Survival of the Richest, How the Corruption of the Marketplace and the Disparity of Wealth Created the Greatest Conspiracy of All, 2017, Crimes and Cover-Ups in American Politics, 1776 to 1963, published 2019, forward by Ron Paul. And then in 2020, Bullyocracy, How the Social Hierarchy Enables Bullies to Rule Schools, Workplaces, and Society at Large. And he also operates the Donald Jeffries Show from 6 to 8 p.m. Wednesday, live on Achelli.com. And also, I think he's also on Truth Frequency. And the intro or foreword to this book was written by somebody I'm familiar with. His name is John Barbour. And Don is good friends with him, so he can talk more about that. So, Don Jeffries, welcome back to the show. Thanks for agreeing to the interview.
Oh, it's good to be back, William. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on the book. And for people maybe who didn't hear our last show, maybe you can talk about some of your other books and what led you to put together this one on Borrowed Fame.
Well, my main my wheelhouse issue is the JFK assassination, and political corruption is what I know best, and history, hidden history. So my two books on hidden history are by far my most successful. And in fact, I'm working on Hidden History 3 now, and I'll probably have a Hidden History 4 as well because I've got a lot of material. But that's my my main baby. But I have lots of other interests. I consider myself primarily a novelist. I've only had my first book was The Unreals, which is a science fiction, but I have a couple other novels that I think are the best things I've written, and I can't get them published. I had much more success with nonfiction. So I'm going, going where I can go to get it out there. Hidden History again was very, very successful. It's by far my best-selling book. Survival of the Richest, I wrote about economics, disparity of wealth, and you mentioned Huey Long. It has a whole chapter there on him. So it's a bit of a departure for me. It's pretty far left wing, but the left hates it, because I talk about immigration. So it didn't really get the audience it should have because of that. And Bullyocracy, about bullying in schools. The people that have read it love it. I got lots of feedback from it. But again, people, because we are run by a bullyocracy, and there's a lot of that there, and it's tied into sociopathic behavior that at the top of every profession that pays well and has respect. Unfortunately, our society doesn't want to admit that it likes the bullies much more than it likes the victims. And that's just a fact. And
that's a fact. I was in corporate America for decades. It's brutal, man. It's worse than high school in some ways.
Yes,
sorry,
it is. It is, and I point out I have a whole section in that book on celebrities and well-known figures, what they were like in high school, and it's unbelievable. I mean, the vast majority of them were big men on campus, were jocks, were prom queens. Cheerleaders, tons and tons of cheerleaders. I mean, you would not believe some of the people that were cheerleaders. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Rosie O'Donnell was her high school homecoming queen. Woody Allen was actually a great high school athlete. He played baseball and basketball. So it's way more than what you think. And it's, you do obviously have people like Bill Gates. You have your nerds that succeed, but by far the popular people in high school, and every statistic shows that the more popular you are in high school, the more successful you are in life, regardless of any fantasies to the contrary. So, but that one is really, it's probably sold less than any of my books because people just, other than the people who were bullied relentlessly, they have an interest, most of them. The rest of the people don't want to go there because it shatters their illusions. And then they have to realize that it's different from like political corruption, but it's tied in that way because it is corruption. And they don't want to look at the way our society is structured when, in fact, almost everyone admires the people who have those bullying qualities, and they don't admire the people that have the big.
I agree with that for sure. And so that led you to kind of move over kind of to this one, focusing on the entertainment world, then, right?
Yeah, well, and this is I'm a trivia junkie. I always used to be the kind of guy. I mean, I could write a book about sports the same way. I mean, I know these things. My head, I always used to say, my head was filled to the brim with things that would guarantee to not make me any money. But I'd win trivia contests all the time. I'd win a Trivial Pursuit. Just I just know things, and I know about movies. I know the history of movies. I'm a genuine expert on it. I know about old television. I know a lot about music. And so, it was natural to me to be drawn to this. And I started out by feeling I wanted to have a book just about the way entertainers were underpaid in terms of royalties and residuals. Because I knew they would. I actually started the book way back in like 2010, 2008 maybe. When I started writing to these people, and a lot of them got back to me. They all told the same story, but I said, I don't know if there's a book there. So I dropped it. And then after I had several of the books published, I came back to it and said, maybe I can turn this into just a look at the entertainment world, not just the money, although a lot of it, I do have a lot in there about the financial disparity and how some people do so much better than others for mysterious reasons. But also, I investigated lots of the unnatural deaths, and I write about body counts all the time in my hidden history books, and not just the Clinton body count. There's tons of them out there, but the Hollywood body count, the entertainment world body count, is as impressive as any. And this is the only other industry where you see these incredible numbers of unnatural deaths, and nobody questions it because they've heard it all before, and they just figure that's just part of the industry. Nobody questions why so many entertainers die at a young age, allegedly of drugs. And then you peel the layers back in the case of people like Freddie Prinze and then John Belushi, and you find out, lo and behold, they actually, they were really obsessed with the JFK assassination. Could that have do with it? And so I look at those kinds of things, and so I investigate Marilyn Monroe, Lana Wood. I mean,
Right.
Lana
You
Wood is
talked
her
to a lot of
sister.
those people. You were reaching out to them through social
Yes.
media, following up. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mentioned Lana Wood because she was an actress as well, and in Playboy and James Bond girl, and she's become my friend. And I've interviewed her twice now, and she obviously believes that Natalie was death wasn't an accident. So those kinds of things. Marilyn Monroe, I've written a lot about that, and Elvis Presley, and all these big deaths. But there's more there than meets the eye. George Superman Reeves, there's tons of them. So the book has a lot of that in there. Death in the entertainment industry has a lot on financial aspects, and then I also go into an overview of what fame is. What does it mean? In the last chapter, I really go into that, and I examine, people that were before you had celebrities, you didn't have television or movies, but stage is where you had your celebrity. People don't know that John Wilkes Booth was a matinee idol. He was a modern historian has compared him to Brad Pitt, but John Wilkes Booth is probably the only actor. Again, all these people were really famous in their day from the 1800s who we remember today, and we only remember him because of the Lincoln assassination. So I look at that how quickly fame disappears. People that were the most famous people in the country 200 years ago, nobody knows who they are now. And I even go into a lot of actresses from as recently as the 80s, even the 90s, but certainly the 80s. Or are you looking, what happened? People forgotten completely about them. And that's not that long ago. So fame has a short life shelf. And a lot of it is that. What does it mean to be famous? And so it's just kind of all came together in what I hope is an entertaining package.
No, it's very fascinating because you get into a lot of details about people and to talk about, a lot about kind of the old elements of the industry, things that I don't remember about, like Spanky McFarland.
Yeah.
And some of these guys just had super famous, but never got a slice of the pie. They just got work. That is almost an encyclopedia of people who went through the entertainment industry and just came out with nothing.
Yeah, well, Spanky McFarland is what inspired me to write the book. He was the first one because I was a huge Little Rascals fan. I loved our gang. He was my favorite one. And I just happened to see him. I was pretty young at the time. I happened to see him on a talk show, and he was an old man. Well, he wasn't that old, but near his death. And he was very bitter about how his name and likeness had been appropriated. And at the time, my wife and I just were newlyweds, and there was a townhouse around the corner. I mean, a restaurant around the corner from our townhouse that we could walk to called Spanky's Clubhouse. And of course, it had the obvious image of our gang on there. And I thought to myself, wow, I wonder, how many other things are like this. And, I talk about it in the book where Spanky supposedly broke down in tears the first time he went to New York City, and he saw all the likenesses and the memorabilia and stuff that, were being sold in his name. And it wasn't just him, but it just hit home with me there. And I go back to people like I have to tell the anecdote that's in the book about Laurel and Hardy, another hugely successful act of Hal Roach's. And Hal Roach outlived all these people. He lived to be 100, fabulously wealthy. He outlived almost all his little rascals. But he had reason to be upbeat. But he exploited them like a lot of the producers did. And, Laurel and Hardy are legendary figures. And I tell the story, I think they were in France and they were on vacation together, and they went into a gift shop. They saw these Laurel and Hardy figurines, and they just bought them for Luke's price to give as gifts. Didn't even think really about, why aren't we getting a cut of this? Because Hal Roach sure was. And that's my point, I think, is that whether it's people that, like my friend Susan Olson and Cindy Brady on the Brady Bunch. I've met a lot of these people. She's become a really good friend of mine. It's going to be on my show tomorrow again. I've interviewed her several times. She's interviewed me. But people like her who were on shows that people still watch today. And they're, in many ways, we feel like, wow, these are iconic figures. It's fictional figures. But a lot of them don't do much else in the business for whatever reason. She's reminded me many times, it's not all just because they can't get jobs, but a lot of times it is. And they got paid okay for the time, but they don't get any royalties and residuals. But you can guarantee that Sherwood Schwartz or whoever the producer of the other shows are, they got a lot of money. And that's what infuriates me is that, why to the people, the producers who put the product out there, admittedly, but why don't the actual actors, the people that nobody's watching Sherwood Schwartz? They're watching the Brady kids, they're watching Andy Griffith and, Barney Fife and people like that. But they didn't get anything for the most part. And, the Three Stooges, when they were older, and I talked to Mo Howard's daughter and son both. And I talked to Curly Howard, Curly's great grandson, who's Curly G. He's still got an act. He's on the peripheries of trying to break into something, but he's out there and nobody really knows who he is. But and maybe if he had a fortune from the Three Stooges, which logically he should have had something to inherit, but they didn't get. I remember, as a kid watching them when I first realized that Curly, my favorite, was long dead, and Mo and Larry, I saw them on a commercial for a local station, and they're really elderly people, and they were hawking T-shirts. And even at the time, I just remember being sad about that because, again, Three Stooges, these are iconic cultural figures, whatever, at least among males. I don't know too many female fans of the Three Stooges, but pretty much every male laughs at them. And, they had to have made a lot of money for Columbia. And then again, when they sold those rights to TV, along with the Little Rascals and other things that I watched as a kid later, it's just, I think, unconscionable that those people, the performers, got nothing when they made millions for the producers. And that's probably the main thesis of the book, why so many people get ripped off, and especially the artists themselves. And certainly in bands, we see, I talked to tons and tons of people that, not tons, but lots of people that sold millions of records in the 1960s, especially. And many of them saw no royalties. They said, what royalties? So,
right, it's incredible. You mentioned Marvin Gaye. Like, I figured that he would have lived in a palatial house with the success of his music. He had to move back in with his dad. It's incredible.
Who ended up killing him? By the way, in another twist that shows how sad Hollywood is. How sad the entertainment world is. Yeah, it's Marvin Gaye did. He certainly wasn't the only one. I mean, Mickey Rooney, it was in the business for probably 80 years because he lived to be 90. Kid actor died with $18,000 to his name. Now, of course, he did have a bunch of ex-wives, so that certainly played into it. But still, and Hedy Lamarr died broke. Why? She was a genius and very good. Um, I see Leslie H's Three Stooges every Saturday morning. Say, yeah, and that's what we saw. But we saw these uh, as baby boomers, or I was on the younger edge of the later edge of the baby boomer era. But yeah, that was what they showed old Tarzan movies. They showed the East Side Kids. Which I don't know how it works, but I have found I love the East Side Kids. But Leo Gorcey and Hunt Hall. So I want to say some positive things here and there. For whatever reason, they came out ahead. Somehow they had a cut of their pictures. I don't know how that worked because by any standard, they weren't as successful as like Laurel and Hardy or the Three Stooges or Our Gang, but they did. So they did well. And that's what fascinates me about the industry is that so many the disparity, the difference. Why? How does Betty Davis, for instance, die with a slightly under $1 million estate? Very modest for someone who was in as many movies as she was. Whereas Stephen Fetchit, who is, the Rachel caricature of all Rachel caricatures and was never in that many movies or any kind of star. He died with $10 million. I don't know how you explain that, but it fascinates me. And I just put the figures out there for people and they can figure it out. One of my favorites, Jackson Brown, I think he has 12 million, which is good, obviously. But how does Lulu, who is a one-hit wonder with To Sir with Love, how does she have 30 million? And that's those are the kind of comparisons I make, and hopefully other people will be interested in it as well. But that kind of thing fascinates me because I wrote Survival of the Richest because I'm interested in fairness and have a keen sense of unfairness. So I take it personally when I see these people getting ripped off, and so most of them, it seems.
Most of them seem to be ripped off, and the guys who make all the money, they're making extraordinarily huge sums. Like off of Marvin Gaye, millions and millions of tens of millions of dollars. Huge sums.
Absolutely.
And you talk about the California Celebrities Rights Act, like they had to pass laws to try to set things straight or right for a lot of these people. And there's a lot of, like, at least I live in LA, there's they've established old folks home for actors who get ripped off or don't make enough money. So yes. there is a consciousness of that.
Well, it was they actually built the motion picture and television. I think they had a motion picture and television country home and hospital. And I have a list there of just some of the actors who ended their days there. And it's astounding because obviously those people needed a place to stay. And maybe a lot of them, because a lot of the golden age actresses especially didn't have children. It's another strange phenomenon. So some of them didn't have families, but some did. And it's amazing. Johnny Weissmuller, I mentioned at Tarzan, he ended his days there. It's kind of cool to look at. He used to, I guess, amuse or annoy the nurses with his Tarzan yell at the home, And so you hear things like that. People can look in the book and see the list, but it's a huge number of people that ended their days there. Not at home with family or anything like that. So it's, and I'm assuming it's because they didn't have the insurance maybe in a hospital and they went there instead.
Right. It's like I said, that there's huge disparity in the success and kind of sadness of some of these other people who got used or got set aside. Like some of the money, like the guy from Napoleon Dynamite, you said only made $1,000. And that movie is super and still famous. They're probably still selling residuals from shirts and everything from that old movie.
It is. Well, I actually talked to a member of the cast who's my friend on Facebook. She played Ellen Dubin. She played Uncle Rico's girlfriend. She didn't have a big role, but she said, nobody was paid. So it was a very small budget film. I think it surprised everyone that it was a hit. So that really wasn't as bad, as egregious as Bela Lugosi, getting $3,500 for Dracula, which is ridiculous. But and unfortunately for somebody like Baylor, he set the tone, and he let it be known that he could be taken advantage of. And boy, was he was taken to the cleaners by the studios after that. He made very little money for considering what kind of a big star he was.
And his son became a lawyer, right, and tried to
Yeah.
rewrite the balance, right?
Yeah, I talked to his son years ago. Yeah, and he ended up winning some rights for the heirs of the Three Stooges and other acts, not just Bela. But so I mean, there's been some victories, and certainly the people today. Not now, ironically, the music business is worse today. The music business is as Graham Parker, who became a good friend of mine, who I loved him. He's part of the soundtrack to my youth. He wasn't a huge artist, but he was big to me. Kind of Elvis Costello light. I love the guy, and I communicate with him regularly. And he told me, that there was a lot of business. Money was everywhere. In like the late '70s and through most of the '80s. And that's kind of what Mick Jagger said. Mick Jagger said there was basically a period of time, maybe from the late '60s through the late '90s or so, where there was like printing money out in the music business. But other than that, before that, I know by communicating with the people that were in the bands of the '60s, outside, and even the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, really, they had the same ridiculous royalty rate when they began of like 1 or 2 pennies, 2 cents a record. And you got to split that up 4 or 5 ways, and so you know how many records you got to sell, and that was the industry standard. They really didn't start making a lot of money until they started their own label. Both of them started their own label, Apple Records and Rolling Stones. So that's when they, of course, they ended up being fabulously wealthy. But most of the groups didn't do that way. I talk about the Dave Clark Five, which was really the second most successful band in the original British invasion. They've been largely forgotten. Dave Clark did really well. And somehow he was an anomaly. Apparently he knew how to negotiate, but the rest of the band didn't. And I go over a couple of the sad stories there and the very meager estates they left. And again, these people sold millions of records, but a lot of the ones I talked to, like I said, they didn't see any royalties, and some of them were, Freddie and the Dreamers had a couple huge hits, and one of the guys was driving a taxi a few years
later. Right,
that's
incredible. It's incredible stuff. And I think you quoted Alan Klein, who was, I think he was the head of he was the biggest bastard in the valley. All those guys sold a lot of records, thought they had money, they didn't end up with it, right?
Yeah, and Alan Klein was responsible for stealing. He's the reason, the Rolling Stones made no money at all on the early hits. Because Alan Klein, a lot of people, I mean, in average walks of life, we don't read the fine print in every contract. And those guys, those kids, even the Rolling Stones, they were so happy to have a manager, happy to have a contract, and they're trusting, basically. And so he stole them blind, and he got the rights to all that. And later, John Lennon was, brilliant, one of the most brilliant musicians ever, but he was snookered by him as well. And McCartney saw through him, but the Alan Klein got his heels into the Beatles for a while too. So that's just one guy, but a lot of these cases are most of the time it's the record companies, but sometimes it was their managers, and certainly the black performers fared even worse. And I talk about how virtually none of them got any, especially like Morris Levy, who was the mobster that ran Roulette Records, and Tommy James and the John Dell, again, sold millions of records. Talked about his experiences there and how they personally witnessed him basically waving guns at black artists and saying if you want royalties, talk to the King and Queen of England, and that was basically his line. And he wasn't the only one. And so there's a reason I talk about artists and who was it? Oh God, I can't think of. Big country, Waylon Jennings, I think it was Waylon, was saying that it got his first royalty a couple of years ago. I may be mixing him up with somebody else. But again, how is that possible when you've been in the business 40, 50 years? So, most people don't realize that. So when you go see these bands at shows, that's about the way to support them, because I think that's where most of them have made whatever money they make is by touring. They certainly don't make it on their royalties from record sales.
No, it's really bad. And some of those music that you listen today, you think that you're listening and the benefit goes to the band, and it doesn't. Like I remember the early Aerosmith albums, they don't even own those. So a lot of these
Yeah,
guys, like you're listening
yeah,
to music that somebody else owns. Paul Zaneson too. He ended up buying, I think, the Lord of the Rings information too, right? With the money
yeah,
he made off of Credence.
yeah. Well, that's like McCartney he couldn't buy the Beatles catalog back. They owned the Beatles. Michael Jackson got it. McCartney got Buddy Holly's catalog, still pretty prolific. And McCartney's almost a billionaire, so he did well. But that's kind of the way it is. I think Alan Klein also got a hold of Sam Cooke's catalog. And Sam Cooke again was one of the early artists who wrote most of his songs. So,
And he was the chief beneficiary when Sam Cooke died, right?
right. And so, under mysterious circumstances,
He was a
he
genius. He was
was incredible.
Incredible
Yeah,
for years.
yeah, it was incredible. I mean, there's so many of these guys, and so it's some do very well, obviously, but others struggle. And when you're talking with communicating with Graham Parker, it's almost like talking to a peer. And I idolized this guy when I was young, and but he never had any singles. He sold a lot of albums because again, at that time when music was its most successful and they were making the most money, you had lots of people like him who didn't release singles. I mean, for a while it was like I didn't like anybody that released singles. It wasn't cool. You listen to their album, listen to the LP, and you had stations, FM stations that played album cuts. They didn't play hit records. They didn't play top 40. And those guys made a lot of money, I thought. But I guess Graham Parker didn't make that much. And of course, as time goes on, the '90s and the thousands, you got to realize how do you keep that flow coming? So if Beatles, Rolling Stones are one thing, they're played all the time, but it's people don't realize now that streaming services. I didn't go into it very much. A couple of people like Danny O'Keefe, who's a friend of mine on Facebook, who was had the song "Good Time Charlie's Got the Blues" was a huge hit in the early '70s. But he's one of those album artists that I love. Very very good songwriter, great lyrics, really quirky melodies. But I love his music. But he was telling me look into the streaming services, and I have, and that's why the recent uproar over Spotify is so hilarious because you realize how little Spotify pays its artists. You realize
That's what I've heard.
Oh, and so Neil Young, for all the brouhaha, and Joni Mitchell, who I love, I'm very disappointed she got into, supporting censorship, but I've always loved her. And she ought to be the last one to like the medical establishment because she had Morgellons disease, which they don't recognize as real. So that ought to tell her something. But how together they're probably not making $100 a month, to be honest with you.
Right.
They paid
right.
That's
nothing.
it. Yeah, that's it.
Wow,
nothing.
Nothing. Wow.
So they made a huge sacrifice. I mean, it's ridiculous. The whole thing is ridiculous.
It's a bunch of peacocking, strutting or something like that.
Yeah.
And why would they even care what Joe Rogan said to a doctor on his podcast too?
It's the impulse. The woke left wants to censor everything, and people like Neil Young and Joni Mitchell, especially, who hasn't been well in recent years. I guess they're trying to regain relevance. They think this is a popular stance to take, and it's a shame because they were great artists at one time, especially Joni Mitchell, and but it is what it is, and that's one of the saddest aspects of today. And I was going to say that as far as television actors, especially. They're obviously making out much better because if they're on any television show at all, they do get really great residuals for the most part. Whereas, you go back in the 50s and 60s and even in the 70s, you get nothing. So for those people, it's much better. The business is much better than it was. But for music, it's the opposite. Because first of all, people don't, music is the reason why those old artists are still relevant and why young people listen to people like that is because the music today is horrible for the most part. I mean, that music, the classic rock, and it's just much better. It just is by any kind of empirical standard. I understand taste is personal, but it just is, and so it's there's nothing there to replace that. And the bands that do exist, again, they don't get those huge recording contracts anymore, because you don't have people like me and my wife and people of my generation that bought 1,000 albums each and bought 1,000 LPs each and a bunch of cassettes and then a bunch of CDs. Went to scores of concerts, bought T-shirts and all that stuff. You don't have that now. You don't have the maybe people go to they play it on Pandora for free, or maybe they go to Spotify or something like that and pay iTunes. But the artist gets almost nothing out of that. But they don't go really and buy their records anymore very often. So they're not, and especially with the COVID, the pandemic, they're not drawing really huge audiences. My wife and I saw a few years ago, before COVID, we started going to concerts again. We saw people like Jackson Brown, Ringo Starr's band, um, at a fairly big arena, but it wasn't huge. It wasn't like the kind we would have seen back in the day. And we go out to the local hockey, pro hockey rink or whatever, and they might draw 25, 30,000 fans. But this is going to be a lot less. But there's a lot of them that play. We saw Don Henley of the Eagles, who's worth $350 million. So I'm not going to feel sorry for him. But it was we saw him at the MGM Casino, and a lot of these acts, Pete Townsend and Roger Daltrey, the Who played there. And I want to say maybe 500 people, maybe if it's full. So consider these people were playing at 50,000, maybe 100,000 in big stadiums at the time. So it's got to be a come down for them. Although their cases, none of them need money, but no, it reflects how the times have changed.
They really have. And you go into you talked about residuals, but you also talk about crime and corruption that's in show business. Can you cover a little bit of that?
Yeah, well, that's I touched about the organized crime aspect, and we see it in both the music industry and Hollywood. I talk about people like Eddie Mannix, who was a basic mobster, who was Louis G. Merrick's second in command at MGM. And back in the day, and he covered up the little incidents that Clark Gable and the other stars at MGM got into. He probably covered up the murder of Paul Byrne, who was Jean Harlow's husband. I don't know if Jean Harlow killed him, but he didn't kill himself. They were, the MGM studios were all there at the time, but that was Eddie Mannix doing that. You had the certain mob involved murders of Thelma Todd, one of the most lovely young actresses at the time, who was found beaten and behind her the steering wheel of her car, and they claimed she killed her. I think she beat herself to death on the steering wheel. but these are the kind of nonsensical, and that's why it's, again, I draw the analogy to politics. You see the same kind of thing, and victims of the Clintons or JFK assassination type witnesses, where they shoot themselves 2 times in the head, Gary Webb style, that kind of stuff. That's what you see a lot of that in Hollywood. But Thelma Todd, it's like a lot of these stupid, frankly, Hollywood starlets ran around with mobsters. Again, we get into bullyocracy. They, unfortunately, that's what's attractive sometimes. And but Johnny Roselli, who's been connected to the JFK assassination, he had an affair with Donna Reed. I was heartbroken when I heard that. I mean, you talk about loveliness on screen. Mary Bailey from It's a Wonderful Life. But so it's been around for a long time. But Eddie Mannix, originally I mentioned him because you fast forward to the late 50s, and George Reeves, played Superman on the TV show. Supposedly kills himself. They find him dead in the upstairs bedroom when his girlfriend and other friends are downstairs. Very strange circumstances. He just happened to be having an affair with Toni Mannix at the time, who is the wife of Eddie Mannix. If you're playing around with that kind of fire, you're going to get your fingers burned. I mean, he's, this was a genuine mobster. So there's no question in my mind that Eddie Mannix had him killed. Again, our media doesn't have the guts to say that, to kind of dance around it. Hollywoodland, the movie with Ben Affleck, did an okay job of kind of hinting at it. But then in the end, they drew no conclusions. I mean, it's clear what the conclusion was. But so you see the mob influence there. And in show business, I mean, in the music business, it goes back to the days when Al Capone, his men kidnapped Fats Waller, kidnapped him. and took him to Al Capone's big birthday bash. Now they paid him well, so yeah, I guess maybe he was happy to be kidnapped, but he still was kidnapped, and he went against his will. Louis Armstrong, and lots of these other black artists grew up playing in the New Orleans houses that were run by the mob. So the mob was everywhere, and of course you get to the '60s and you have people like Morris Levy and Ermet Ergen and Ergotin. I don't know how to pronounce that. Other big guy that these guys again. It's all dominated by organized crime, and there's unfairness there, and so it's.
That's what people don't understand is that those big studios and a lot of the music companies are run like a mob.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's it.
Absolutely.
That's what they do.
Yeah, they do it. It is organized crime, and they're run that way. And it's when you see that, so it's not all the deaths that I chronicle in there are really not surprising because I think that for instance, just in the JFK assassination, John Belushi, Freddie Prinze, Sal Mineo is another one. All three of them, three of the very few, at least who publicly expressed doubts about the JFK assassination that we know anyhow. But there
was another one you mentioned in the book, which a name I didn't know it was a woman, maybe Lisa Howard too, who died mysteriously too. She was a JFK kind of truther. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah, well, she's the one I think that they claim had an affair with Castro, and it was supposedly going to be used to be the go-between between JFK and Castro to try to set up rapprochement with Cuba, which makes laughable the assertions that people wanted Castro assassinated. But she ended up dying, and she was originally an actress. So if you can, in fact, I was watching an old sci-fi movie, one of those great ones from the '50s that I love. I can't remember what the title, but I always look at IMDb afterwards to look at what happened in the cast, and to tell you the truth, that's where I got a lot of my information for the book. Because I know that almost every old movie, I'm going to find some quirky thing that's going to interest me. Somebody, okay, that was their last movie, and they were only 30 years old. Why? I don't know. Or they died really young. Some actress will be 33 and die of a heart attack. Things you don't see, really that often outside of show business or maybe politics. But Lisa Howard was in that movie, and she started out actually as an actress, and then she kind of gravitated to journalism, and was really like a pathfinder before Barbara Walters or anything else. Or I think she and everything, and then dies mysteriously like the others.
Like another in the '60s, another suspicious '60s death. Don, we're at about 37 minutes. Do you mind taking a couple questions?
Sure.
I got one. Do you have this is from Roberta Glass, True Crime Report. Do you have an opinion on Fatty Arbuckle's criminal trials?
No, I didn't cover that one because it's been covered so much in other places. You hear lots of things, lots of strange things. I tend to believe that he was treated unfairly. I'm not sure what happened and God, I can't believe I can't remember her name. Virginia Rapp. The victim, certainly she died a horrible death, but that was also the Roaring '20s, and there was a lot. This is not the 1960s, but it was very much like it. Drugs, especially just in Hollywood, not in America at large, but in Hollywood, there were lots of drugs being used, lots of drinking, and lots of illicit sex. And from what we know of Virginia Rapp, she got around. Now, whether Fatty Arbuckle actually did what has been attributed to him, I don't know. I tend to think, he didn't seem to have any kind of other incidents like that in his life. So I think it was an anomaly, and I think he probably, for whatever reason, was made an example of. I kind of tend to feel sorry for him, but I don't know. I'm not a real expert on it.
Gotcha. And did you know much about Anthony Pellicano?
No. Well, he was a private investigator, right? That was that. Well, I think he used to pop up in a lot of these cases, but he was the kind of guy that he had been with the mafia, and I don't know. I kind of tended to think that he might have still had some connections there. I didn't find him really that credible, but again, I'm not a real expert on him. But just my first impulse when somebody mentions his name would be to kind of go, well, I think like National Enquirer or something. I don't think it really that credible.
I heard when he got out of jail, there were a bunch of celebrities who gave him a bunch of manila envelopes so that he could get back on his feet. That's very mob-like, but that's a whole nother story.
Yes.
Sheila Ann asked about Bobby Fuller. You mentioned him in the book. Can you talk a little bit about him?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm indebted for that and for a lot of things to the late great Dave McGowan. His book Weird Scenes Inside the Canyon about Laurel Canyon and the music scene back then. He goes into detail about it. But yeah, Bobby Fuller was a great young musician, very Buddy Holly like. And I'm sure most people, even if they're younger, have probably heard the song "I Fought the Law and the Law Won." Great rock classic from the '60s, and that was soaring up the charts at the time he was found dead. Found dead in a burned out car, gasoline poured down his throat, and I think they called it suicide. I mean, typical for the music business, but that kind of thing it doesn't happen outside politics or show business. But yeah, I think a lot of people have speculated that he was offed by the mob or he had some kind of mob, connections there that got him. But yeah, certainly strange death. And one thing I reported that I still don't know what it means, but his brother had been murdered years before, which I don't know. It just seems strange to me. I don't know if it means anything or not, but I look for those things and I mention them.
But it's another strange death that isn't investigated by the police. And my understanding is that the relationship between the industry in Los Angeles and the cops is a little bit too close, and that some people are way too friendly with some other people.
Well, yeah, and the LAPD certainly plays into it here because they, as we saw in so many things later, certainly in the Robert F. Kennedy assassination, I mean, we know what kind of work they generally do. So I think they certainly will play ball. And I talked about the inexcusable treatment of Patricia Douglas. I have a long section on that, who was a showgirl, aspiring actor, I guess dancer and aspiring actor who was raped at one of these big, party get-togethers where she was the entertainment, kind of flitted around in skimpy outfits and entertained men. She was raped by some bigwig that had connections to the studios, and the studios just destroyed her. I have all the details in the book, but and she was like I think 30 some years old at the time, and she never had sex again. She was turned off to sex the rest of her life. I mean, that's just horrible. But that's that's the kind of stuff that they could do. That the power, and of course the LAPD was always ready to play to play ball these people, so they never invested when Paul Byrne, Gene Harlow's husband, was found dead. The LAPD didn't ask any questions about, well, what about this? What about this? Why are MGM executives here at the scene of the crime? They shouldn't be here. What are they cleaning up or what? They never did that, but that's what the police have generally always done, isn't it? When a politician involved or a big Hollywood figure. But I like that comment from the Love Don's books. Thank you, William. Thank you.
I do too. Where's the best place for people to get on Borrowed Fame, Don?
Well, they can. I tell them to look for the best deal. It is more expensive than I would like, but authors have nothing to do with that. Hopefully, it'll drop in price. But look around for the best deal you can. Certainly, there's Amazon, there's Barnes and Noble. The publisher itself is Bear Manor Media. Might be able to get a slightly better deal there. But I always tell people to look for the best deal, and I always tell them, recommend it to your public library. Have them buy it, and then you can check it out and read it. I get a sale either way. So, look for the best deal you can, but it's widely available. If you search for it, you can find it in a variety of.
Gotcha. And the best place to reach out to you is your website, right?
Well, I have
social media.
Well, I basically have a blog, donaldjeffries.news, and I also write regularly at Substack, which is donaldjeffries.media. My email is authorjeffries@gmail.com, but I'm easy to contact. I'm on at Don Jeffries on Twitter, very active. Well, I'm active on Facebook as much as I can be. They have a shadow ban on me, so I used to be very active, but whenever I post anything now, nobody sees it. So I have a limited range there, and then of course I have my talk show, the Jeffrey Show, and I protest is coming back. I'm no longer on Truth Frequency Radio. I'm going to be on rockfin.com starting tomorrow. So Thank you.
I'll put that in the show notes. Check out on Rockfin. And thanks so much for your time. There's a lot more in the book. There's other stories about more tragedies, the reality behind the facade. So there's a lot more information in this very information-filled book. So go get it. Title of the book again is On Borrowed Fame, Money, Mysteries, and Corruption in the Entertainment World by Donald Jeffries. Thank you so much for your time, Don.
Thank you, Wayne.
All right, take care. Stay there.
Thank you.
All right, cool.